but not back then.
Mm-hmm.
But in California, it passed, and it passed pretty easily. And it goes on, and it goes on. I mean, I was thinking about Mary Pickford,
mm-hmm.
who was, of course, a major movie actress.
Mm-hmm.
But she was one of the principals behind the company we think of as United Artists,
mm-hmm.
which was the first studio that was owned by actors. You know, I mean, they challenged the big studios, you know, and by creating their own studio. I think you had Douglas Fairbanks Sr., I think, was in on that one, and trying to think. But she was one of those. Then what about Hedy Lamarr, who, besides being a star of the 1930s, is famously an inventor and had a major patent in the field of, I think it's torpedoes, something like that. Look it up. Helen Douglas, another actress who went into politics, and she's a woman who Ronald Reagan defeated. Mm-hmm. But at one time, she was considered a very impressive female, you know, in politics. And again, she was from California. So we could go on and on about this, and then of course now we have Dr. Ford, who was. Do you remember offhand what college is she from? It's not Berkeley. Santa Cruz?
I think it was Santa Cruz. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, well, there you go. It didn't surprise me that the first woman in the whole wide globe who would step up and challenge Kavanaugh would be a college professor, and that she'd be from California. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It didn't surprise me. I don't know if it surprised you or not. Mm-hmm. But it somehow it just didn't surprise me, because obviously it had to be someone who had a feeling of enough security that she could do that and not lose her job. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tenure or not, no tenure. I think it would take a lot of courage to do that, but especially if you're going to lose your job and have your career destroyed, you know, you wouldn't do it. Mm-hmm. I think that's, as you know, I know that she's received nothing but support from her own students and her colleagues at her own university. You've heard that, you've noticed that. Right. Because they like her, they know her, and they trust her.
And a lot of Kavanaugh's friends from those days when he was in school and doing all this drinking and some raping, apparently, of women, young women, some of his friends have actually come forward and said, you know, I saw him drinking, I saw him being aggressive toward women, and she offered, as I recall, to take a lie detector test. I can't remember if she's actually done that, but I don't remember his offering to do that.
No, that's right. She was, even before she came out publicly, her attorney apparently had her submit to a polygraph voluntarily. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure those results have been turned over to the FBI. As we speak today, apparently, there's something about the FBI not interviewing her. In a way, they say that her testimony in front of the Senate was enough. Mm-hmm. I actually sort of understand that in a way, that they decided that, 1 hour of questioning under the Supreme Court, when she told the whole story and there wasn't anything more to ask. And if they do, they have to just ask her attorney or something, get it. But I sort of understand that, because they probably have a lot of other people to interview.
But they
realized that they needed to get to those people first, people who had been interviewed. I think as we speak today, I think there's
Right.
Four women who have, including Dr. Ford, who have claimed some form of abuse. But on top of that, and it could be, we're now in a little bit of a speculation here, but it could be that the FBI will in fact not focus on allegations of sexual misconduct, let's call it, but in fact go straight to the issue of whether or not Kavanaugh lied to Congress. Because, for instance, he said that he was 18, and he said the drinking age was 18, when in fact it's been proven that the drinking age was 21 in Maryland at that time. And so, and the thing is, as I posted on my Facebook just yesterday, I pointed out that if you lie to Congress and if you lie to the FBI, it doesn't matter if it's not very important. Everything you say to the FBI or Congress is important. And about the only possible excuse you could have would be, I really don't remember, or I really thought it was for sure that way. But if you make a whole bunch of these mistakes, they're not going to believe that you were innocent. Right. And Kavanaugh looks like a very guilty man, because there's that one, and there's the fact that he's always said what a gentle little soul he was, and now we discovered that when he was at Yale, he got into a bar fight. He seemed to have started the bar fight, which put a man in the hospital, and the police were called, which is what usually happens when you go to a bar when a bar fight happens. Actually, that's not. I've seen bar fights where cops didn't come. This one had the local city cops come, and he's probably, but for the fact that he was attending Yale, he probably didn't get picked up. Right. And it was in the 80s, and people, anyways. So,
and then
there's just so many. Then examples
found out,
of it. And I'm trying to say is that none of this stuff he represented to Congress, to the U.S. Senate, right?
Well, there was one more lie, Hannah, that I want to bring up. There's one more lie he told. He said that he got into Yale under his own power.
Yeah, I busted my butt. I know exactly.
Yeah,
when he was
really his uncle or dad, I think it was his uncle, had been in Yale, and that
grandfather.
His grandfather, and that's what helped get him in.
Yeah, that was a legacy.
Right.
Yeah, which of course is I guess you could call it affirmative action for the overprivileged.
So that was to me, in my eyes, another lie he told to Congress or the FBI or both.
A misrepresentation.
Yeah.
But certainly the main ones I think of is all the stories about his fighting. And his violence have two effects. One, obviously, they suggest a personality flaw of the worst kind, making him unsuitable to be a judge. Second, though, is the fact that he misrepresented it. I was listening to MSNBC, and they were interviewing a certain federal judge, or former federal judge. I guess she's no longer a federal judge, has, for some reason, no longer on the bench. And she was pointing out that her confirmation took 11 months, and they asked her to write down everywhere you've lived and everyone you've lived with. And the interesting thing is, that's interesting. What's interesting is that I can tell you that when I applied to be a lawyer in the state of Hawaii, I had to list every single place I've ever lived, pretty much since I was born, which was kind of hard. I'm sitting there looking on Google Earth, on Google Maps, trying to think. I remember my apartment was about here.
Right.
And I, of course, for the record, had no trouble whatsoever passing the background investigation. But I find myself wondering very seriously, what happened with Judge Kavanaugh? How is he a lawyer even?
Right.
Who's checking this stuff? Because you have to have good character just to get on just to take the bar exam. As unless secret, and he didn't go to Wisconsin. It's the only state where I know of. Or anyways, he went to Yale. If he went to Yale, he'd have to no matter what state he was barred in, or District of Columbia, or whatever. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like people were saying, oh, there were 6 background checks that include all his things with the Bush administration, White House, and U.S. and federal judge and all. Yeah, and none of them caught up any of this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because my life's an open book.
Right.
So, I invite people to go and check into my background.
And you know, Kavanaugh got very defensive when he was asked by one of the woman senators on the panel something about, have you ever been so drunk that you've blacked out? And he turned the question back on her, even though it wasn't a hearing of her, it was a hearing of him. And defensiveness is usually associated with the idea that you have done that thing, so we've hit a nerve, and you're just not willing to respond and give the truth.
Yeah, that was Klobuchar,
right.
and Klobuchar, who, by the way, is the former district attorney. I'm from Minnesota. I should remember this. I voted for her. But Ann Klobuchar, U.S. Senator, exactly, and it wasn't just that. I mean, I watched that on video. I might have watched it live. When I watched it, I kind of thought to myself, maybe he was trying to build some kind of rapport, you know, something like, well, yeah, we've all done that. You know what I mean? And if she'd asked him something like, you know, hey man, have you ever done pot? You know?
Yeah, I don't know about rapport.
Okay, yeah, I have. But so we've all done that, haven't we? But but it wasn't taken that way, and it shouldn't, because
it looked really defensive.
It was, and eventually on MSNBC, Senator Ann Klobuchar went out and told the world about how apparently her father had a serious drinking problem. Which probably, you know, in my experience, judging by my own father, whose father was an alcoholic, you know, I can imagine that it tends to either make you an alcoholic or a teetotaler. You know, when you have family members, close family members who abuse alcohol.
Right.
And obviously with Senator Klobuchar, I think he's probably very much sober. No, but it was like, haven't you? And even if it was, I know that Klobuchar was absolutely shocked about that response, is why there was no response back. Because the proper response should have been, well, she just said, you know, could you answer the question? Her should have answered the question. She should have said something more stronger, like,
it's not
that
me.
That answer is not responsive.
Right, and I'm not the one
or
being,
I'm not here to answer questions, you are.
Exactly.
Or something. But I think she was just stunned, because it was clearly, you know, now we should point out that
it was so
he had
totally
begun his so-called opening statement.
Yeah. She had to be stunned by his being...
was 10 degrees off plumb.
Yeah, she had to be just totally stunned by his utter inappropriateness, you know, with that reply.
That reply and a bunch of others. But I mean, when he began by talking about Clintons and Trump haters and on, and that was his opening statement. This is not after he got wound up. I remember people on Twitter were jokingly asking if there was booze inside the water he was drinking. It seemed like he wasn't drinking water; he was drinking scotch and soda. Right. Because you know, he was really out of control. And if that's his idea of an appropriate way to defend himself, I guess that's really what bothers me. I mean, that was a written statement. I mean, not me. That's not just me, right? But think about it, dear listeners. That was a written statement. This is not just an off-the-cuff, you know, or just, you know, I was winging it, or I just, you know, he had written all that down and delivered this litany. And it was unnecessary.
Right.
It was entirely unnecessary. It could have been, I mean, if a lawyer had written it, if he, you know what I mean, trying to say, if Kavanaugh